Welcome back to a brand new episode of the MMA Beat. It is Thursday, May 18th, 2017. We are rolling 3 deep this week, and that's why we had 3 little boxes there on the screen in honor of us. Exactly. In honor of us rolling 3 deep this week. Great to be back doing the show. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ariel Helwani in our New York City studio. As I mentioned, 3 deep, man in the hat, not with us, but we do have Luke Thomas of SiriusXM and MMAfighting.com. He still does the show. He's back.
I do exist.
Yes.
Is this him?
It has been a while.
It's like a Sasquatch
You were
sighting.
in Colombia, Dallas, all over the place, and now you made some time for us. We appreciate that.
Ready to rock.
All right, good to have you back. And of course, that is Mr. Reliable himself, Jeff Wagenheim.
The Cal Ripken of the MMA.
Exactly. He will never miss a show.
No,
Rain,
I'm gonna miss one.
shine.
I don't know
yeah?
when, but it's gonna happen.
All right, well, it's good to have you here. Of course, he is of the Washington Post. Okay, guys, lots to discuss. We were off last week because of 211, and a whole lot of things have happened in the world of MMA since we last spoke. But let us start with late-breaking news pertaining to the much-anticipated, highly debated Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather fight. Last night on Inside the NBA, of all places, on TNT, Dana White shows up and says that he has come to terms with Conor McGregor on their side of the deal. Now they must go to the Mayweather side of things and come to terms with them. But one hurdle appears to be completed, and shortly after his appearance on TNT, Conor McGregor came out on the MacLife.com, his own website, to confirm the news, put out his own little statement, little jab at Mr. Mayweather, telling Al Heyman and his quote-unquote fighter to get their side of the deal done.
His boxer.
His boxer, yes, to be exact. Good call. And so here we are. Let's see what happens. Now, it's important to note, this doesn't mean that the fight is done. I'm seeing some headlines that would suggest that the fight is done. It is not done. Dana, Conor got their deal done. Okay, are we surprised that here we are, May 18, 2017, that we even got to this point, that this actually happened? What do you think?
Yep. Yeah, I am. Certainly, I have to confess, this is very surprising. This is, the guy has a mental projection that sounds ludicrous, as we know, and life sort of stumbles its way into the territory of what appears to be fantasy. You know, now that we're here, if you asked me like a few months ago, am I surprised we got here? No. Like, once the ball kind of got rolling in a realistic direction, it's not at all to me surprising that Dana and Conor were able to work out a deal. And in particular, it should be noted that Dana and Conor working out a deal is like, if there's 100 pieces of the deal, that's like 10 of them.
Yeah.
Mayweather is going to be a giant problem. I guarantee it. So I don't know how long that's going to take, if it gets done at all. But we should keep that in mind. They're not. All I mean to say is they sort of frame it as 2 equivalent pieces. Got the Conor part, now the Floyd part. Yeah, well, the Floyd part is this much of the pie. The Conor is that part. I don't mean financially, I just mean in terms of logistics. So keep that in mind as well. But you got to be honest, man. We are sitting in a position where I made a point on Twitter today. I was like, if there was a boxer who had relatively no name, but the same exact skills and experience of Conor, would you pay Floyd $60 to $100 to go lay waste to him? Or lay waste to him? No, you wouldn't. You would never dream of it. But here we are in this bizarre scenario where this is all anyone can talk about, and it has come from the minds of these 2 guys. It is literally life imitating art, almost to a point. It's bananas. It's bananas.
Here you say, here we are talking about this thing, and you know, you mentioned that the thing was announced on TNT during the NBA broadcast, which is, you know, that's not a mistake. You know, it's really interesting that they found really the biggest stage in sports last night to get at least the first part of this out there into the public. This morning, I'm coming into the studio. I'm driving to the train station, and I'm listening to Bloomberg News.
Wow.
And they mentioned that Conor McGregor had signed for this. I mean, this is kind of crazy. We're not talking, we're not talking, you know, like the ESPN radio. We're not talking Fox. We're talking Bloomberg News, of all places. I mean, is there any place that is outside the realm of this? It's pretty crazy. But as Luke said, I think that this was the easy part to get done. You know, Conor McGregor and Dana White, they've worked out deals before. This is, regardless of the particulars of whatever amount Conor McGregor gets out of this, it's going to be the biggest payday he's ever seen, guaranteed. So that was the easy part. Now we're going to be seeing what they can do. You know, Floyd Mayweather, to his credit, has removed the promoters from the boxing world. There's no more Don King running the whole show, and Bob Arum is, like, you know, doing his thing, but Floyd doesn't even bother with him. Now he's got to deal with the promotion the UFC and see how he's going to, what he's going to give, what he's going to take. And I think that's going to be a bit of it's going to be a fight.
In that statement that Conor put out last night, one thing that really stood out to me was that he noted this was the toughest part of the deal, in his opinion, to get this done. Is he being naive?
He's being super naive. Yeah. Also, it should be noted, like, he was definitely taking a jab at Mayweather, and because we talked about this before on the show. Mayweather has gone out of his way to say, I don't have a boss, Conor. You have a boss. Yep. The way he framed it made it sound like I have to work with Dana, you have to work with Al Heyman. They're not equivalent scenarios at all, by the way. Al Heyman's sort of like a negotiator for him, but it doesn't have the same contractual duty that that Conor has. But in any case, he was trying to do that. But I mean, folks don't even realize, they forget that the day of Mayweather-Pacquiao, there was concerns about what the boxing gloves were going to look like and who was going to watch the hand wrapping and who was going to be the cut man and all this stuff. They forget about that. And the other interesting part about it is there wasn't a lot of promo done for Mayweather-Pacquiao. Folks also forget that there was that one large event where they faced off, and then they kind of just went into full gear. But if you go back and look at Mayweather-Canelo, which was also a plus 2 million pay-per-view buy rate, there was a ton of problems with that in trying to figure out how they're going to do a city tour, who comes out first, who stands where. And, Canelo was mostly compliant. McGregor, I mean, I don't know if he's compliant. I guess we're really going to find out here how compliant he is to really be a deft businessman. All I mean to say is this is the hard part. No. This was by far the easiest part to get this done.
I think that one of the interesting things about this is how the UFC, and particularly Dana White, has turned this into a UFC fight. And even though it's being contested in a boxing ring, and it's going to be a boxing match with big gloves, it's all boxing. But the UFC, because there were two routes to go to get this fight done. One would be for McGregor to essentially buy himself out of some element of his contract and say, we're going to pay the UFC some money. Now I'm going to be free to go negotiate a deal with Floyd Mayweather, and we're the ones that reap the benefits. But that's not the way the UFC went. The UFC says, no, we're gonna promote this thing, and I think that's kind of a key thing that I think is going to really make it more likely to happen because they have so much to gain here.
Also, never forget that Conor saying this is the hardest part is also another way of saying, just projecting onto reality what may not actually be there to set a narrative. Look, we got the hard stuff done. How come you can't do it?
Yeah,
you know
it's all on you. Yeah, that's a phenomenal point, by the way, because, to me, for the longest time, we were told, okay, like, when Dana kept saying, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen, I don't know if we all kind of believed him 100%, but he did show a lot of resistance to the fight. Said that line about the being the backup quarterback for the New England Patriots. And I keep talking about this one picture with Conor McGregor and Lorenzo Fertitta. And if you look at the date, it's early February. After that, everything changed as far as Dana's stance on the fight. And I believe, reading the tea leaves, that Lorenzo kind of got them all together and said, okay, you can either go to court and fight this, or we can be a part of this. And I think they all agree that it's probably in our best interest to be a part of it. And so you're 100% right. This could have been some kind of major headache, major drama. They would have fought it, Ali Act, all this stuff. And at some point, they agreed to get on board with it. And it's probably the right choice for the UFC. But here's my question. I'm wondering, if this is 2016, the UFC enjoyed a phenomenal year, right? 2016, their best ever. 5 pay-per-views, over 1 million buys. This is 2016. If this is before the sale, are they as eager to do this fight? No. Are they as willing? Or is this shades of 2014 when they had a horrendous year and signed CM Punk in December because they needed something to get people excited about? Are they doing this almost, in other words, an act of desperation because they've got nothing going on? This is trending to be post-sale, first year, new management, one of their worst years in recent history. 208, 209, 210. I can't imagine 211 as good as it was, being some kind of great hit on pay-per-view.
It wasn't.
Where's the million buy fight? Are they doing this because they have to do it?
And people are even saying, hey, at 213, let's assume that Garbrandt and Dillashaw fight.
Yeah.
Which is no means a given.
No.
Right. Let's say it is.
Cody Garbrandt's getting needles in his back in Germany. Right now, and the fight's a month and a half away.
But let's assume for a second that it's on, just for the sake of argument. Even if that's the case, I have had fans come up to me and be like, so who's the real headliner for 213? I'm like, no, that's it. Like, just look at the roster. They don't have anything. So clearly we are doing this, when I say we, I mean the community generally, but certainly the UFC is doing this in a climate of a down year. There's just absolutely no two ways about it. I don't know how you could possibly divorce it. If they were still in 2016, they would be significantly more resistant. There might be more for McGregor to do in terms of an enticing option as well.
Yeah.
There's also that too. Also, it's not merely that you are going to court. It's the perception that you're having a down year economically and you're in court with your #1 star. The optics of that are absolutely brutal. You couldn't do that. But let it be known, there are people, you know, you talk to people in the community and insiders, and I think people in the UFC as well, it's not like they're doing this happily. I think there are a lot of apprehensions about how this could go. And the truth about Mayweather and McGregor is we don't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We tend to think McGregor could lose, but even in that could save face. All I'm pointing out is there's a number of possibilities available to us, but many of them carry some significant costs, both for McGregor and for that brand. It is not that they don't think that those are real costs. It's just having a down year and then fighting McGregor in court is so bad that they would just rather roll the dice on what kind of option they get in the end.
I mean, I agree to some extent that
Then you're wrong.
That the down year maybe makes things move a little more quickly. But I just can't imagine the UFC putting up such a fight against this, even in a good year, because even in their best times, they could not make the kind of money they can make with this. And, you know, let's face it, the UFC, part of what has created good years is not necessarily just, oh, they had really good fights. It's that they've done things to try to create that kind of scenario. And, you know, so here's one that's laid out right in front of them. And so even in a good year, I just imagine them saying, hey, let's just take the gravy for this one.
You know, you've talked about this a lot recently, how Conor puts things out there, he imagines things, and then they become reality, and it's an amazing ability. I also think one sort of underrated aspect of his personality is his timing. His timing is absolutely impeccable.
It's insane.
And what I mean by that is, this is a guy who was rolling, killing it, as Lorenzo Fertitta started to think about selling the company. And as a result of that, in my opinion, Lorenzo Fertitta kept giving him more rope, because his success kept upping the value of the company. So that's why they were very willing to throw all logic out the window and have him fight Nate Diaz in a rematch. That was going to be a $1 million+ pay-per-view buy fight, and that would get new owners very excited. That's like their first big fight if they bought the company in July, August. So he kept giving him more rope. New owners come in. Okay, you know, MSG is great. We need something big for MSG. It doesn't really make sense to put a division on hold. We think he's probably going to leave after fighting this fight, but we got to make him fight for, you know, for 2 belts, right? We got to make history. So he had the timing of Lorenzo wanting to get out, wanting to up, you know, the value of the company. He has the timing of the new owners coming in, wanting to make a big splash in New York for the first time. And now he has the timing of 2017 being a lackluster year for the UFC and them saying, gosh, we have to do this. Anderson Silva, when he wanted to fight Roy Jones, which was, in my opinion, a less riskier fight for the UFC and their brand, didn't have that timing. Neither did Nick Diaz. Neither did all these guys who wanted to have, you know, something spectacular done, something outside of the box. His timing in all of this has just been absolutely superb, and he is the beneficiary of their down year, in my opinion, because I don't think that they do this if they're killing it. I think that they feel like they have to do this. New owners, they need to make a splash. Hollywood, excitement, celebrities, big loan. How do you resolve all this? Mayweather and McGregor.
What marks the career of Conor McGregor as a fighter inside the octagon? Timing, aggression, moving forward.
Yeah.
And that really encompasses what he's doing outside of the cage as well. Moving forward always, pushing forward to the next thing, and doing it with impeccable timing. So it's like inside the cage, outside the cage, same deal for him.
And so here's the question. Do you actually think Floyd will agree to this fight? Because there are some people who still don't believe this fight will happen. There are some people who
I still have a little bit of skepticism about it. I mean, I'm not saying Floyd will or he won't. I really just don't know anymore. You know, before it was, this fight's never going to happen. This is insane. And here we are today, you know? So never say never. I don't know. But I do know that Floyd, like, okay, so on the one hand, Floyd is going to want to get his way. I mean, I know a lot of MMA fans, like, Floyd's not exciting, and this fight with Berto didn't do well. Let's be clear about who we are talking about here. We are talking about the all-time king of pay-per-view on boxing, period. Combat sports, period. He is El Rey. That's the guy, okay? You can say what else you want about him.
What language was that?
Spanish.
French?
He is the guy. I'm just trying to be clear about it. There's no second guessing him. He is the man in charge when it comes to that, and he has a way of doing business where he wants his needs catered to. So on the one hand, I think that presents difficulty. On the other hand, Floyd likes treating people like suckers. He always has, man. He always likes fighting really tough guys. You know, not the Baldomir fights and things like that, but, you know, you go back to the Maidana fights or certainly the Berto fights, less so Canelo, but he's at the Cotto fight. He likes to fight guys a little bit off peak. Get that timing right when their earning potential is highest and their fighting potential is not low, but it's not what it once was at their most ferocious. He really likes to get in there. He always makes safe bets. He too has good timing. He too always kind of identifies when the right moment to strike is. And I think he sees this scenario as this is easy money. I'm not saying, I don't know what's going to happen either with the fight being signed or what's going to happen ultimately. All I'm saying is Mayweather sensing a major opportunity to get money for a relatively low risk fight is probably too much for him to pass up. But there's probably a number of roadblocks to get there.
And it is a low-risk fight for Mayweather because Conor McGregor is 0-0 as a boxer. And I don't think that time is going to change that all that much. So there's not a lot of pressure on Mayweather to get this done this week or next week. You know, he's not thinking to himself, well, this guy, you know, if I wait too long, he may get good enough. This is perhaps the best boxer of our generation we're talking about. I know he's 40 years old, but still, it's Floyd Mayweather. He's not worried about McGregor getting better as a boxer because the best boxers that Floyd has been in with have not been able to touch him. So I think that this puts him in a position where there's no other fight that can earn him the kind of money that this one will. It's low risk, and it's low risk even if it doesn't happen for, you know, X amount of months. So he's just going to, you know, negotiate hard, get all he wants, and cash in. I
also kind of feel like this whole story, this fight, has been somewhat of a godsend for Dana White himself as a promoter. Let's be honest, the inmates are trying to run the asylum in the UFC.
Trying is the operative word.
But what I'm saying is there's been an incredible amount of pushback, unlike anything we've ever seen before. Before, I mean, it was just gigantic news if someone said something remotely negative about the UFC, or let alone Dana White. Now we're having guys at media days just sitting there with PR standing right there, just crapping all over the company. People tweeting him like Luke Rockhold this week. And yet, with this fight, Dana's back to the old Dana. He's on Inside the NBA. He has Shaquille O'Neal, you know, kind of bowing down to him. He's Mr. Promoter, and as you mentioned, he's the one out there setting the narrative for all of this. Conor's not doing interviews. Floyd's not doing interviews. He's the one setting the terms. He's the one coming out and saying, we lost our date. He's the one saying, now the ball is in your court. He's the one saying, I'm going to get my deal done. There's a deadline, this and that. And he willingly put out that September 16th was off the table. Remember that? Mm-hmm. Canelo, Triple G, he's talking to Fight Hub, right? Mm-hmm. And he says, we lost. And I thought that was so telling. Dana White doesn't usually willingly give up information. And I still believe that September 16th is on the table. I still believe that because Canelo and Triple G don't have a venue, and they have not announced a venue, and there's no sign that it's going to happen in Las Vegas, at least as of right now, they're going to try to go on that date. And let me ask you, if they do go on that date, do you think Canelo and Triple G move?
They would.
Do they have to? What's the bigger fight?
Oh, I mean, my God.
I don't know. I mean, Canelo and JCC did $1 million.
Yeah, but
no one thought that was going to be anything.
Well, and they were right. Another one where it was like that. No, there's no chance they would go head-to-head. They might go head-to-head if it was something like one was taking place in Europe and one was on HBO for free, and then another one was on like Showtime pay-per-view. In that limited circumstance, perhaps you could do something like that. But both stateside, both asking for pay-per-view dollars on the same day.
Pay-per-view companies wouldn't want it, right?
There's no way. The MSOs would say, no chance we want to do anything like that. So, of course, it would get bumped. And, of course, Mayweather and McGregor is bigger. Like, Triple G versus Canelo is a legitimate fight in every way imaginable. But to your point, Dana White, just to clarify this, Dana White didn't merely go on NBA on TNT. He went on there and answered a question about whether the fight would be an MMA or boxing match. Yeah. In other words, they are touching the most ignorant fans. But when I say that, I don't even mean it disparagingly. That's where the money is. Yeah. The money is in the rubes who don't know that Conor probably stands next to no chance. We'll see, but probably not. But that's the giant portion of the audience. And so when you just think about how Triple G, Canelo was announced versus how this one is being done, it's a completely different size and scope of the audience.
But that's why that's the bigger fight. The McGregor-Mayweather is the bigger fight only because the casual fans, people who are listening to Bloomberg News this morning on the radio.
Right, exactly.
These people will watch that one. They don't realize that this boxing match is really one of the shining boxing matches of the last many years. I mean, this is a really big boxing match of two guys who are pretty much in their prime and are really going to go at it. This is a big boxing match. I mean, so if you're looking at it from that perspective for boxing, if you're a diehard boxing fan, there's no question of which one of these fights you're going to watch. But how many diehard boxing fans? That's this number. The number of people who are out there and who know who Floyd Mayweather is and who know who Conor McGregor is. That's this number. It's like a completely different audience.
The fight is only being made. Literally, the fight. To my point about would you watch a no-name guy with that kind of skills and record fight Mayweather? Would you shell out $60 to do that? No, of course you wouldn't. If you had any sense.
$100.
Or 100, hell, right? I mean, what would you do? You wouldn't shell out 6 cents to go watch that. The point being is that fight is literally only being made because of the clash of celebrity. But I want to go back to a previous point you made, like this is his saving grace. It is and it isn't, in my judgment. You ever seen that tattoo or like the masks, the theater masks, laugh now, cry later? I got a little bit of a feeling that's going to happen here with this one because my sense is McGregor doesn't have to do well to do well. If he lasts 12 rounds, and yeah, he gets lumped up, but he goes in there, maybe lands a couple good lefts, and brings the audience to its feet a couple of times, that's all he really has to do. All he has to do is just meet minimal expectations, and he can say, look what I did. I went in there and I hung with the best boxer ever, and blah, 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 blah. He can really spin it to a positive degree, but ultimately, if that's the case, it's going to be a bit of a letdown, right? This will be a boring contest or one-sided in some kind of non-dramatic way. And my point is this. It is good for him that he's able to be on NBA on TNT, and he was smiling like a kid at Chuck E. Cheese doing up the thing. But the point is, for me, that there's a cost to this, and it says a lot. It says that the biggest fight you can make is not even in your sport. Your best guy doesn't even want to fight in your organization right now. He wants to go do something else. And yes, that is aberrant, but it is also apparent. The other fact is, if that fight does end up sucking, and everyone was like, oh, I guess that was going to happen. All this stuff about it's kind of close and look at the reach and look at the age and Conor's big, it will blow up in his face dramatically. You were around in 2006 and 2005 when Dana White was seen as the anti-promoter. All those boxing promoters who lie to you and will just tell you whatever you want to get you to buy, I'm not that guy. I'm going to tell you how it is honestly. And now we're in a position where he has certainly had some he has spent a lot of that equity he had, but he hasn't spent all of it. And I really wonder if he goes out there and tries to sell this in a way that is ham-fisted, and the fight ends up being terrible, this is reputationally harming for him in a way that nothing else has been.
And sort of along those lines, I just want to say that there was one narrative that he was putting out last week that kind of blew my mind, and I couldn't believe that some people were buying it, especially in the media. He kept saying, I can't deal with this forever. At some point, I have to move on and get back to my business. This is your business. Right. You're not doing this for charity. You're not doing this because you like Conor McGregor, as he said, I don't want to be the guy who stops Conor from making a lot of money. Your company is making a lot of money here, too. You're not doing this out of the goodness of your heart. Stop saying that this is a departure from your business. This is your business. Sure, it's not an MMA fight, but you're going to make millions and millions and millions of dollars. WME is going to be very, very happy if this gets done. So I don't like the idea that this is something that is kind of distracting him from UFC 212. This is, this is the Hail Mary of 2017. They need this. This is something that will make them a lot richer. This is something that will, help their loan. So it's baffling to me that people believe this. And also, just to say, speaking of the media stuff.
Not distracting, but I do think he doesn't like it.
I don't know. He's on TNT, smiling.
Yeah, he likes being on TNT, but ultimately...
This is celebrity. This is what they strive for, mainstream acceptance.
No doubt about it. But does he really want to be out there promoting a boxing fight? I don't think he does.
But in that way, I think that's where I would go in contrast to what your point earlier about, like, if this fight sucks, then it really hurts Dana White. In some ways, I think it might make his job easier, in a way. If the fight sucks, they still cash in immensely. And then
Conor comes back.
Then all of a sudden,
Does he?
Then all of a sudden, a lot of those other guys who have been talking about going out and boxing somebody, then maybe it gets laid to rest.
Sure. Yeah.
If McGregor goes out there and not wins, but just goes out there and looks respectable and has a decent fight with Mayweather, there's going to be all these other boxers. We've already heard Stipe Miocic and Anthony Joshua and there's so many other ones of these that have been talked about, and all that stuff can go away if that fight sucks. The UFC goes to the bank with the big check.
Yep.
Deposits it, and then we're done with boxing. They go back to MMA.
And we return to normal a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe Conor's stock goes down a little bit. Maybe we put an end to the
I'm not saying
interim.
Look, I'm not saying that won't happen. Not saying
There's an
that at all.
argument to be made that it could be a blessing.
Could be. Look, like I said, there's a variety of different ways it could go. All I'm saying is you can't discount some of the bad
sure.
possible outcomes and the damage they could cause. But it could go away where it's great for everybody. And hey, if Conor somehow finds a way to do the impossible, happy times are here again, aren't
Yes.
they?
If Conor McGregor is standing at the end of 12 rounds, that's a win for him. That is
And the UFC.
And Mayweather is not a big knockout guy. So there's a chance of that happening.
So
And no matter what happens, yeah, right. No matter what happens in this fight, look, Conor McGregor got choked out by Nate Diaz, and he immediately turned the narrative around to the point where he got the fight he wanted, the rematch. He rose right back up to the top of the world. He is a guy who, as we talked about before, has the timing and the delivery to change the narrative in a heartbeat. If this fight goes not his way, he'll find a way to change it in a heartbeat. Hey, why don't you step in the octagon with me? You got your boxing win. Come on, Floyd, come in the octagon and see what you can do in there. He'll find a way.
But the big difference there, of course, is Nate Diaz is like 10 times Luke's size.
Right.
So,
he is huge. He is huge.
He is massive. One last quick thing on this. Every time we talk about this fight, tweet about it, write about it, I inevitably get people who say, well, you crapped all over it. You poo-pooed this fight. And I want to make this very, very clear. I believe that this fight is a media fabrication. I believe that if certain shows on television did not talk about this fight wouldn't have happened. They willed this into existence. They talked about it so much because, again, they could not make sense of what it meant for Conor to go into MSG and become a two-divisional champion. They could not make sense of what it meant for the UFC to debut at MSG and break the gate record. They cannot make sense of the sport, period. Who Conor is, what he's done, how successful he is, what his place in history is. So they all of a sudden, like they did with Ronda 2 years ago, said, okay, well, can he beat Floyd Mayweather? And important people saw that and recognized that a lot of people would talk about this fight if we got it going. If that conversation never happened, because I firmly believe last year this time, when it started to percolate, this wasn't on the table. In November, it wasn't on the table. The media made this fight into a thing. And yes, we're part of the media, but I don't believe we made it into a thing. And that's why, back in November, speaking for myself, I said it was disingenuous to talk about the fight on November 14th, 2 days after UFC 205, because I thought that we should be talking about what he just did to Eddie Alvarez. He smoked Eddie Alvarez. He made him look like an amateur in that fight. And that, to me, was worth debating. That, to me, was worth discussing, celebrating, breaking down. Not a fictitious fight that is now turning into, nonfiction.
Oh.
So again, things change, things happen, but there are certain outlets, there are certain shows, there are certain media personalities that I think talked about this fight and made it into an actual thing. Kudos to them for doing that.
We've been talking about this fight for 20 minutes or something, and we have yet to talk about the fight. All we're talking about is the promotion,
we'll have time for
the
that,
business.
yeah.
Well, I don't think we will. I mean, is there really going to be? Are we going to be sitting down here, weeks or months away? We're going to be talking about, if Conor can, cut off the ring a little bit. We're not going to talk about that. It's kind of a, it's a spectacle. It's not a real fight. It's not a fight that those of us who follow this sport or those who follow boxing closely are going to have any interest in, other than like, well, what if something crazy happens?
Yeah. Okay, let's move along because we do have a lot of other things to talk about. I want to get your take on the Bisping GSP / rest of the middleweights disaster of a situation.
Yeah, I like how we go from boxing, yay,
Yeah.
MMA, ooh.
Well, I mean, it is kind of a headache.
It's a
so
nightmare.
a week ago, Dana White did an interview with Fox Sports Australia and said, I'm done with this fight, I'm canceling it, it's off. And then shortly thereafter, yes.
Go ahead.
Shortly thereafter, we hear from Bisping, we hear from GSP. Well, no one told me it's off.
And repeated it on Jim Rome.
Yes, but initially was Fox Sports Australia.
Yep.
And so the two fighters involved say no one told them it's off. They still want the fight. Romero's side saying, okay, yeah, you know, they said on your show, Malki Kawa, you know, there's been some talks, but of course we knew Romero would be in if presented. Bisping needs to be in. There needs to be, you know, 2 fighters involved, and in particular the champion. And slowly but surely, even I thought the tweet to Luke Rockhold earlier this week, where Dana was almost still defending the matchmaking, was a sign that maybe it's not quite off. And, you know, witness the fact that initially when he said it, we at MMA Fighting did not choose to report it because no one involved in the fight, including Romero at the time, had been told that the fight is off. And now this week, Bisping has become a little more vocal. He says he has an injured knee. He'd like to wait. Romero sending out a tweet today saying, I'm kind of moving on. What do we make of this whole situation? Is this all gamesmanship? Was this another way of Dana telling GSP to hurry the F up so we can get this fight going and move on with the division? Do you truly believe in this day and age where they need to make, you know, money and big fights that he is willing to move on? How do we wrap our heads around this?
Yeah, I don't want to live in a world where the UFC machine is so controlling of fighters that they put down any dissent or, you know, where they're constantly monitoring everyone's activities. But at the same time, this is crazy, where they're just saying things, they're putting them out into the world, and you literally can't know if it's true. I mean, think about that, right? If Goodell says,
It sounds like some other walk of
Dude,
life.
It is crazy how politics mirrors MMA now. It's insane. Yeah. But in any case, another discussion for another time. If Goodell says, I don't know, something. I'm going to be meeting with so-and-so, or this kind of rule is being instituted. You know, there's no denying that there's going to be a press release in your inbox if you're a reporter in the next 5 minutes. There's no. This is, you know, he told Fox Sports Australia. I mean, I'm sure this is a wonderful outlet, but the fight's not going to be in Australia. It's going to be here. Why wouldn't you tell American media? You know, okay, repeated it on Jim Rome, but what? Like, and I spoke to Malki Kawa, as you mentioned. He's like, you know, we haven't no bout agreements yet. Well, okay, well that's a bad sign. And then Michael, to your points, everything you said. So my point being is, how do you steer a ship so haplessly and aimlessly like this? Where, as I mentioned before, again, folks don't realize now everyone's like, oh, Dana said X is going to happen, Y is going to happen. Dana said X isn't going to happen, X is going to happen. That did not used to be the case. I am telling you now, that did not used to be the case. And to see him with this Mayweather McGregor, you know, Conor, he's got a big left. Okay, and to say now with GSP and Bisping the same kind of thing, it is shocking to watch them just. Do you remember? I know I'm meandering here a little bit because I just am at a loss for words. Do you remember when, I think was it Tough 14, when it was Chuck versus Tito?
Yeah.
And then Tito fell out and Rich Franklin fell in, and Dana White lied on the record saying, no, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then people called him. It's like, why did you lie on the record? He's like, it's a reality show. Get over it.
Yeah.
Boy, those chickens have come home to roost, have they not? Wow, you can't believe anything anymore. And so, do I think it's gamesmanship? Probably, because I feel like Michael Bisping, the middleweight champion of the world, would probably have an idea about his competition window. And same for GSP. Whether or not that fight is actually going to be made, whether they're going to make an interim title, I don't know. But to me, you are at a point now where the guy who's the most powerful entity in the sport has reduced the amount of trustworthiness and transparency that he has to the point where he can literally declare something, and you're like, maybe.
Yeah, it seems like it's part of the negotiating promotional machine as opposed to the passing of information to the media and by extension to the public, the fans. I mean, I don't have much to add to what you said. It really just is confusing, and it makes me always think anytime we hear something from Dana White, we want to step back a little bit and look at the big picture a little bit. And you know, if he mentions this person, that person, it's a good idea to see what those people have to say about it as well, because you just never know. And there's always some method to it at some point, we imagine, but it seems like there are times when it just is kind of random.
And I know the Goodell comparison is not identical for the reasons we've been over 1,000 times.
The Trump one was. I mean, I think because the PR people are, you know, putting out this one message, and then there's this guy who's just like freewheeling, you know, happens to be talking to Fox Australia, and someone probably asked him something, and he's like, all right, I'll just throw it. Yep. And then how many times have you heard him say, "Oh my PR guys are going to hate me for saying this," and then he says it. You know, it's like the message is he's the guy who constructs all the messaging, and that kind of, you know, can be hard to follow.
You know, it's interesting about what Dana is. I mean, he's sort of more nakedly revealing who he has become in a way, and I think it's inevitable. Honestly, I'm not bagging on him for it. I think this is just a a progression towards what he always had to be, which is, you know, if you think about what an owner is, pick one, James Dolan, right? Dan Snyder, two of the best in the business. But nevertheless, they communicate typically through a corporate PR office where everything is in line and it is done in a very structured, measured, direct way. A promoter, when they speak to the media, is much more manipulative. It's really about, I mean, and everyone's political, right? Even the owners who are speaking in a very buttoned up kind of way. He has trended towards the manipulative in a way where it's like, I don't even know how you can go back to the more corporate one. Even they put out a press release this week where it had Cody TJ on there, tickets go on sale tomorrow. It's like, for real, you sure about that? I don't know how, I mean, the guys.
Well, how about last month in Buffalo? We asked him, will John Jones headline 214?
Yeah.
No. Now he's headlining.
Yeah, he's headlining.
Right. Will you be bringing in flyweights? No.
Yeah, for
then
sure
yes,
I am.
Then no, then yes.
It's not even about Romero Bisping GSP, although that situation has its own peculiarities.
Yeah.
It's more about to what extent, how as a fan do you get your information? How as a media member do you verify it? What does verification even mean? How deep do you have to go? And where are we sort of headed with all of this?
See, I don't mind that as much. I'm kind of over all that. To me, the big issue here is Michael Bisping. So Michael Bisping was told twice that he would be fighting GSP. Last year, when they were trying to make the fight happen for Toronto, he agreed. And then, of course, this year, when they announced it, they did the press conference. And so here's a guy who, again, it's not our duty to sort of campaign for him to make $1 million, but them's the facts. The guy has never made $1 million+ for a fight. He's been around for 10 years. He essentially has one eye. He pulled off a crazy Hail Mary almost a year ago, and so he wants his money fight. But again, he's not going out there and sitting like this and saying, give me my money fight. They promised him the money fight. And GSP is sitting there saying, October, November, let's go. And so now here we are mid-May. Okay, so let's just say they announce it today. You need at least 2 months to prepare. So that takes us to July. What are we really talking about here? 3-4 extra months at this point, right? So is it really Michael Bisping's fault that they can't find a main event for July 8th? Is it really his fault that they can't find a main event for August or September? It's not. They promised him a fight against GSP. They did a press conference for it. He has every right, in my opinion, to say, like, wait a second, you promised me this. It's not my fault that you got... GSP said it at that press conference that I can't fight in the summer. It's not like he's changed the narrative. It's not like he's gotten injured. It's not like he's holding out for more money. He's been saying this from the beginning. So it's not GSP's fault or Bisping's fault. Unfortunately, the way I view it is they kind of made this bed and they have to lie in it. And I don't feel like it's fair to Bisping or GSP to make them pivot and do something else at this point. Why did you make it in the beginning, in the first place, if you were told by both of them that they would be, A, Bisping wants to fight GSP, and B, GSP can fight in the summer? Why all of a sudden have things change?
So, okay. The UFC bears a degree of responsibility here that I share. Why did they have him do a presser and announce it when you had no bout agreement, you had no firm date in mind?
Date, right. Yeah.
That I feel like they really, really botched that. Lesson to them, don't do that unless you know when it's going to happen. But that being said, you can make all the arguments you want to make for Bisping and GSP about what they were promised and what they weren't. You can also go back and say, y'all should have done this in Toronto when you had the chance, all that stuff. However, I'm also thinking about the rest of the division. I don't know why Yoel Romero can't get a title shot when he's owed one.
That's not Bisping's fault.
It's not, correct. But the UFC, if they're going to say, okay, we botched this a little bit, we got to give it to him, we still owe it to him. Michael's knee apparently is not even making July possible, right? But you still have to give the rest of the division a reason to compete. There is a general malaise that is taking over, and they cannot say, well, because we're going to give GSP and Bisping what we owe them, and we do owe them, well, fuck the rest of the division. I don't believe in that. I'm not saying that's what you're suggesting. I'm merely saying to accompany that effort, I would be totally okay with an interim title. You got to get these guys excited and up for ready for competition.
I couldn't agree more. This is one of the few times. I mean, you did it for Khabib and Ferguson 4 months after Conor won the belt. Bisping has now declared that he's injured, and I kind of wish he never said that, but he has declared that.
Right.
Do Romero versus Whitaker. Do Romero versus Mousasi, who appears to have re-signed. Do that fight for the interim title. Then that ensures that guy that you will be next whenever it comes, because you can't make him fight, other people for the interim belt after winning it while Bisping is off fighting someone else. That cements it. You need a main event for July 8th, it appears. Just do that. This is one of the few times where I'm actually okay with it. I actually feel like, you know what, just do it. And guess what? The night of Khabib and Ferguson, when we were all kind of so sad that the fight was off, no one cared that it was interim, real belt. We just all wanted to see that fight. And I kind of feel like we would all want to see Romero versus Whitaker, or Romero versus Rockhold, or Romero versus anyone who's a top, Musasi, even Anderson, for God's sakes. Just make that fight, and that will, I think, start to expedite things, because now you have Romero upset, you have Rock. That's all Rockhold's asking for. Again, I actually think he's right. Like, he never said, I want a title shot. He just said, I want to have some clarity. I want to know what I'm fighting for here. I think this would actually open things up a little bit.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but I don't want to put myself in a position where I'm defending what I would consider an illegitimate middleweight title fight. I don't think that Bisping fighting GSP is the right title fight. And if they were signed contracts and a date and all that stuff, okay, I'll go sit in the corner and shut up. But all he did, they announced that it was going to happen at some point, and then they never got it together. And now they're saying that it's not going to happen, or at least Dana White is saying it's not going to happen. To me, I think he's kind of righting a matchmaking wrong. I think that if he can get Bisping and Romero, that's the fight. That is the #1 contender against the champion. And again, I'm not the guy who's paying Michael Bisping's mortgage payments every month. So I understand that he has a right to be upset that he's not going to make that million pay-per-view, all that money. But, if you're the champion, you got to be defending your belt against the #1 guy.
I couldn't agree more. They are righting the wrong. But let me ask you this. If you were told by the editors of the Washington Post that you would now be the editor-in-chief of the newspaper.
Oh, God help us.
Oh, boy.
And then 2 months later, they said, you know what, on second thought, you're not. You'd be pretty pissed off.
Yeah, of course. But if I would hopefully get them to say, to write it down and sign a contract. Or
I mean, they did a freaking press conference.
And look, we're not talking about the Washington Post, which, as far as I know,
that's your job.
They have a track record of saying something and then doing it. Dana White has a track record of saying one thing and not doing it. You want to call?
This is pretty rare. Like putting on a.
Let's call Misha Tate up and see. Ask her about the title fight that she didn't get.
It's one thing to sort of spout it off at a press conference. It's another to actually put together a press conference between the two guys, have a poster, have an announcement, go on SportsCenter. This one's kind of unique, right?
You're right. This does ramp it up to a whole other level, but. Nobody had bout agreements. I mean, look, I'm not going to say that Bisping doesn't have a right to be pissed off about this, but if he were canceling or if he were putting off a fight that wasn't so good and then putting up another one, say like, well, we're going to get CM Punk in there to make a ton of money or something else, I'd have a problem with it. But if you're putting that fight, you're taking that fight off the table, and you're replacing it with the most legitimate middleweight championship fight you could have right now, I'm not going to argue with them.
All right, let me ask you guys about this. Speaking of July 8th, we thought it was going to be Cody Garbrandt versus TJ Dillashaw, and worth noting that originally that was actually supposed to be the co-main event. They tried to do Bisping versus GSP. They tried to do Ferguson versus Nate Diaz. Neither of those fights came to fruition, so that got bumped, and now it's in serious jeopardy. I mean, witness the fact again that Cody Garbrandt is in Germany getting needles stuck in his back, and the UFC is saying, yeah, we're pretty confident he's going to fight, and he's saying, yeah, I don't really know if I'm going to fight. I mean, the fight's in a month and a half, he's not training for it. And now, once this came out, TJ Dillashaw has been campaigning for a fight against Demetrious Johnson, of all people. This is very interesting, but when I asked DJ about it, he poo-pooed it, said it's not fair to the division. There are guys who have been working their way up the ladder. Here's another guy coming in. No, I'm not all that interested. Would you be interested in this fight? For his record-breaking fight, DJ, if he wins, you don't like it at all?
Oh, I like it, but it's not.
You'd rather see Ray Borg against DJ?
I would rather see him beat a natural flyweight.
Is it because of the record?
Yeah. Like
So if this was number 8, you'd be okay with it? Title defense?
If it was against Borg?
No. If this was not the record-breaking one.
If TJ dropped to 125?
Yeah, this is a title fight.
If TJ dropped to 120, I thought this would be 135.
No, TJ is willing, ready to drop to 125.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Look, I'm not going to say it's not interesting. It is interesting. It feels a little bit out of place, and it feels a little desperate, which is why I don't exactly like it. It wasn't like we were thinking all along, man, it would be great. Right. And you could do that with this one. It certainly qualifies because of the quality of the opposition, but it wasn't like people were clamoring for it as some kind of organic from the earth idea from the fight fans. So to me, it just feels a little bit desperate, to be honest. And in that sense, no.
On whose part?
I think the general community, like media's trying to figure out what are we going to cover. Fans are trying to figure out what am I going to buy tickets for. UFC's trying to figure out what are we going to sell, and they're trying to fix a broken problem. And the broken the broken scenario, and that scenario is, look, you've got guys like Diaz, you've got guys like GSP and Bisping. What is the common denominator there that's keeping them from competing? The knee injury notwithstanding, it's money. right? Here's a reality we need to just sort of grapple with. I don't think it's going to affect everybody all the time, but as guys make more money, they're not going to be as inclined to just accept any old thing that comes along. It will reduce their competitive schedule to an extent. Nate Diaz is living proof of it. They're just not going to do it. And Michael Bisping, if he was going to make the same money fighting Romero as he was GSP, he probably would just say, F it, I'll just go ahead and compete. But there is this countervailing force. And so for me, if you're just trying to repair a situation, there's that air of desperation around it. I am not saying Dillashaw versus Mighty Mouse would be bad. It might be great, but I don't know. Something about it just sort of feels off.
So let me just ask you to be clear. The guy they were talking to is and was Ray Borg, right?
Yeah.
Ray Borg versus DJ, and I heard that it could potentially happen in Seattle in August, which is close to where DJ's from. That's pretty cool for him to break the record there.
Yep.
Ray Borg versus DJ, DJ versus Dillashaw. Which one you want?
Right, you're asking me which one do I like in some sort of theoretical sense, and what I'm telling you is in the context of trying to repair a broken situation, I don't like that.
So you'd rather Borg because it keeps things more normal?
I look, Conor takes a super fight, leaves a division. What happens? You create an interim title.
Yeah.
Michael Bisping takes an interim, or takes a or they bring in GSP to take a super fight. What happens? You're now looking like you're creating an interim title. It creates problems.
Okay.
There's not. Look, is Dillashaw versus Mighty Mouse amazeballs? Yes, of course. But every time you do one of these, there's a cost to be paid. And I don't think to fix one UFC event, I'm really interested in doing that. But I would love to see them fight. What do you think?
I don't think it's a. It's not the. There's no organic. Fight that comes out of the DJ, on the DJ schedule right now. If it's Borg, well, okay, he's the next guy in line in some respects, but he's not. I wouldn't say he's the second best flyweight. I mean, I think that Benavidez is the guy, but DJ's beaten him twice.
Sure, and he's injured.
Right, but Borg is, a little bit farther down the ladder. However, DJ's beaten all the guys that are ahead of him. So I guess it's the one, but it's not a fight that I'm clamoring for. So now enter somebody from outside the division who's going to come down and do it. Now, Dillashaw, it's interesting because he's a former champion. He's a really great fighter, but there is no, as Luke pointed out, there's no organic thing that places them together. Now, if it was instead of him, if it was Dominic Cruz, the last guy who beat DJ, if he were saying, hey, I'm going to drop down to 125, that would be a different story because there's some kind of organic thing that draws them back together.
Okay.
But so I guess I'm saying that I'm fine with the fight, but it's not something that I'm clamoring for.
I'll also be clear about this. I know we're in this money fight era, which is debate about how money and how many fight it is, but you know what I mean. But it's certainly part of the larger conversation. Yeah. We need to be very careful about to what extent we're just going to chase gold to chase gold. And by that, I don't mean the actual belt. I mean this sort of shininess of something. Ooh, wouldn't that be cool if we had this permutation? We need to be very careful about that. I know people think it's boring and lame and like dad wisdom to believe in it, but I believe in maintaining the plumbing and architecture of MMA, which is these divisions. And I believe that, look, if DJ was already on that card against whoever, and then Dillashaw was also on that card and fell out, you could be like, hey, you could put these two together. That would feel less desperate to me because they were already in position. But there's something that just feels a little bit weird to me about we could make this shiny jewel just cause to save an event. I don't want to do that unless there's I believe in super fights to the extent that is one, when there's a majorly compelling reason to do so. And I don't feel like this is a majorly compelling reason.
And also, if Dillashaw is just going down for that one fight, wins the belt, and then wants to go back up, that's a huge problem. You completely ruin the flow of the division. Okay, let's move along to a couple of other things. I just want to ask you about DJ's comments on Ronda Rousey yesterday, and he's made some interesting comments over the past couple days. These are very un-DJ-like, right? I mean,
are they?
Well, he hasn't.
You talk to him in person, they don't feel very
well,
un-DJ
you talk to him in the media, it's a little different. I mean, he's not biting his tongue. He's talking about his pay. He's talking about the pay structure in the UFC. He's talking about fans and what they say to him and how he cares less about what they think. But the one that got all the play yesterday was a comment that he made to Sports Illustrated, John Wertheim, where he said essentially about Ronda Rousey, grow the F up. You lost, no big deal. We all lose. Why do you act this way? Why did you disappear? Why did you not speak to anyone? Some people praised him for it. Some people didn't like it. Was he out of line for saying this?
No. Thought what he said was really sober and seemed, if you're a prize fighter, seemed totally reasonable to me. Look, You don't have to love competition. There are people in jiu-jitsu schools across the country here. I guarantee you there's some tournament they're going to this week. They'll drive 4 hours in a van together, smelly with their gis. They will show up and they will do it again the week after and the week after and the week after. And then there are some students who just don't compete at all. Same thing with other kinds of fighters as well, though you can't do it quite as much with striking sports. But you get the idea. They just love to compete. They just love to do it all the time. DJ is one of those guys who loves to compete, and obviously as a consequence, you can see the results, you know. He really has achieved quite a bit. But Ronda may not love competition, but and that's fine. That's not a... If they don't, she doesn't love the reality of MMA fighting as much as DJ does and what it requires for success. That's okay. I'm not judging her for that, and I don't think he is either. I think well, maybe he is a little bit, but I think what he's more saying is there's a certain mindset you have to compete in this at a reasonably adequate level, and you faced even a little bit of adversity and you just walked. And now she walked for more reasons than that, the money, everything else. But I think in that world of prize fighting, I think what he said is totally non-controversial. Not at all. I don't have any issue with it whatsoever.
Yeah, I thought that the little soundbite, you know, grow the F up, that was kind of a jarring thing to see. But then when you, well, I read the rest of the comment, the entire context of what he said, it made total sense. It was, hey, we're competing here. It's all about, you know, you lose. Well, everybody loses at some point. You pick yourself up. You know, you move on to the next thing. You try to conquer the next hill. I thought it all made sense. Unfortunately, you know, we live in a soundbite world where that's the thing that got onto Twitter, and it makes him sound kind of callous, makes him sound kind of, you know, like as though we were attacking Rousey. I think he kind of used Rousey as an example, but he probably could have cited several other people if he really wanted to, about how you take a loss, how you move on, how you ensure your success in the long haul. And I thought that what he said was fine.
So let me ask you guys about this as we pivot to last weekend in Dallas, because we've talked about the way Ronda handled, you know, the losses ad nauseum. Is Joanna Jędrzejczyk, here's a hot take question for you, is Joanna Jędrzejczyk the female role model that the UFC thought they had in Ronda, but she truly is that person? The way she fights, handles success, the way she speaks, is that possible that what they thought they had in Ronda, they really have in this Polish fighter? Do you guys get what I'm saying?
Not exactly.
You're looking at me with a puzzled look on their face. You can't say to a young girl at this point, and correct me if you feel otherwise, let me tell you about a female athlete named Ronda Rousey. Let me tell you about all the things that she did in the UFC and how great she was, and she was undefeated. Then let me tell you about what happened when she hit a little bit of adversity. Are you going to be that same way, little girl?
Yeah.
But let me tell you about Joanna Jędrzejczyk, you know, who continues to come and almost retired and fought and sometimes loses rounds and comes back and keeps going and has this amazing perspective. Every time she's on my show, she makes a point to thank the PR people and thank the UFC staff and talks about sending the elevator back down when you reach to the top. Her perspective in her broken English is, to me, a lot more grounded than Ronda was as a champion.
But she's also not... It's an incomplete. I mean, the grade she gets is an incomplete because Rousey was dominating people, and then she goes out and Holly Holm, you know, knocks her out, and then she goes out again, and then she kind of disappears, and so we could judge her based upon that, and then when she comes back, you know, it happens again, and she's gone. So there's a different level. We saw the adversity, we saw how she dealt with it, not very well, and then we saw she dealt with it the same way a second time, and that's gone. We haven't seen the same with Joanna. She has been, you know, I know she's lost some rounds. She's had some fights where she's had a little bit of difficulty, but really, she's been a winner all the way through. If she goes out and if her next fight was against Rose Namajunas and Rose just like schools her somehow and knocks her out or chokes her out, let's see what happens then. Then we can judge her.
I certainly agree that, like, you know, the character traits that Jędrzejczyk shows are totally laudable things. I mean, who could say otherwise, right? But I don't really bag on UFC. I mean, I bag on UFC again for the hyperbole and the lengths they went to in media as well, you know, and saying the things they said about Rousey. But let's be real about something. You mentioned something about UFC 211's buy rates. You know, you get on Twitter on a night where Jędrzejczyk is fighting, and it's just like people are tripping over themselves to offer praise. And then you look at the buy rates, and they're not there. Like, there is a big gap, a massive gap, between what the casual audience really thinks about her or even knows about her, to be honest, and what the hardcore audience does. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. In fact, I wish it was the opposite. What I'm really saying is Rousey was just this phenomenon, and maybe we went too far in reaching what she could tell us and show us about the world, but she was an Olympian, and she was a pretty face, and she was willing for a time to be candid. In the end, it turned out that when she faced some adversity and had some money in her pocket, she didn't love MMA enough to keep going. Is that a bad thing? I don't know that's a bad thing.
No,
I mean,
but
look, Nate Diaz didn't get his ass kicked necessarily, but when he got some money, he walked too. Like, this is my point. These people have options, they take them. And so I understand what your point about Jędrzejczyk. She is a great role model, not merely for young girls, grown men.
Sure.
But I mean, you saw a rocket take off. You're going to want to watch it go, you know?
To me, the turning point has always been that embedded speech where she talked about do nothing bitches. And they made that into such a big deal. I mean, could you imagine this speech was just so honest and raw and truthful, and Beyonce's playing it. And to me, I found it insulting to women.
It was.
Who are you to tell women that they can't go out and make money a certain way? Who are you? I mean, you're a fighter. That's all. You're an athlete. It's not your position to now start, waxing poetic on the state of feminism and things like that. And that's why that to me was like, no, wait a second. You don't have the right to put down other people just because you're enjoying success in a certain way.
She was also a time for a short time. Folks don't forget, she tweeted a Sandy Hook video and being like, check this out, this could be interesting. Like, are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
So she's always been a little rough around the edges, but the point being is, if you can attract a large audience, even if you're saying dumbass things, people will be just somehow, the emperor always has clothes when there's an audience in front of them in some kind of way. They manufacture it. And so, but I do think her story is compelling, and I do think some of the things she did were amazing.
I'm not taking anything away from her, but I felt like once she got to a point where she was actually putting down other women for trying to make ends meet, for career paths, now you're actually the opposite of what they're trying to make you out to be.
Yeah.
You're not some sort of...
She went too far, but I think that initial rise, for me, was impossible to ignore.
And I'm just sort of blown away by Joanna, again, someone who is not fluent in English, the way she's able to express herself, handle herself, and sell fights. And so let me ask you guys about this. Joanna's in the co-main event, Stipe's in the main event. Stipe is, in my opinion, like if I tell you that I have a heavyweight who's also a firefighter, who has 4 straight first-round knockouts, who's the heavyweight champion, who comes from Cleveland and is beloved there and is enjoying success at the same time that Cleveland as a city is enjoying sports success, and I don't tell you anything else. I don't tell you about his interview skills. I don't tell you anything else. As a promoter, you would be on that first train, right? I mean, that is a promoter's dream. A heavyweight champion who's knocking people out in the first round, who's from Cleveland, all this stuff, firefighter, good Samaritan, and yet for some reason it feels like he's not resonating with people. Joanna is to a degree, and I'm not saying that she's going to go out and sell 1 million pay-per-views, but is it possible that Joanna, the 115-pound champion, is actually more popular than the heavyweight king who's knocking people out in the first round? And if so, why?
I don't know. Look, it depends on popular with whom. I mean, within the MMA bubble, I still say that the heavyweight champion of the world that's a big deal. That has always been a big deal, and it always will be. And Stipe is, he has done all the things that you need to do in order to be that figure. I mean, if you knock out, in a number one contender bout, you knock out your opponent in the first round, then you go and knock out the champion to become champion in the first round, and then you defend it 12
times,
and then you knock out those guys. You cannot do much better than that.
Sure.
And so I don't think that.
Well, why is he not a bigger star?
I don't know. Anecdotally, you were in Dallas like I was. You went to the open workout.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no two ways about it. JDS got a big pop, no doubt. But Jędrzejczyk got mobbed. I mean,
so that's what I'm saying.
But okay, but that's inside the MMA bubble.
Fair.
Outside the MMA bubble, their popularity is negligible.
But shouldn't he have the MMA bubble first? Like, shouldn't the heavyweight champ, who we all know?
I think we underrate, like, the media doesn't make a star exactly, but the media can be certainly a great conduit for someone who wants to be a star. He doesn't want to be a star.
Yeah, maybe.
He doesn't want, I don't think he wants that life.
Slowly warming up to it.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, like, I think he likes being, the unofficial mayor. Maybe LeBron's the mayor. I can be the secondary honorary member. He likes going to Cavs games, but I don't think he wants that life. I think he wants a nice paycheck and to take care of his family like all these guys do. But in the end, he's a little bit older. I think he realizes there's probably not much longer. The firefighting's going to be there. Cleveland's going to be there. I want to be there. That's really who I am.
Plus, the heavyweight belt is a hot potato. And, you know, it's one thing to sort of warm up to a champion when you're, you know, watching Anderson Silva slowly mow down the competition and you become a bigger star, or Demetrious Johnson. I know he should be a bigger star, really. That's the guy we should be talking about the bigger star, because that's a guy that has just been doing it, you know, for quite a long time.
But he has to sell people on flyweights a little bit. This is the heavyweight champion.
But he's defended his belt twice, and that's as much as anybody ever has.
Yeah.
And so what you look back at other heavyweights, what has made them bigger stars? Well, because there's something fearsome about them. You know, Lesnar, I don't think is as good a heavyweight as Stipe, but there was something fearsome about him, like mysterious, but both his imposing physical presence and also the kind of demeanor he had. I mean, I think even you can say this somewhat the same about Velasquez. He's not the physical specimen that Lesnar was, but there was something like intense about him, where Stipe just like, you watch him walking into the octagon, he looked like a guy who's just ready to punch the clock and go to work. He doesn't look like a guy who is, you know, he's not, he needs to get lessons from, you know, Diego Sanchez about, you know, the intensity of going in there. He doesn't have that. And I think that's one of the things that's a star-building quality.
Okay, I need to ask you guys a couple more things. I know we're running out of time, but I'm dying to ask you these questions. So here we are, what are we, 5 days removed from UFC 211, so we've had time to think about it. Did Herb Dean botch that call?
No.
No?
No.
Yes.
You agree with it? Yes. Debate.
Okay.
Go.
No, he didn't botch it insofar as saying, given the regulatory leeway that he is afforded, did he make appropriate calls within that? Yes. The problem for me is that he is allowed, in fact, encouraged, required to judge intentionality. That is the problem. The problem is, did you make an illegal strike? Did you not make an illegal strike? Yes, he made an illegal strike. That's not even up for debate. Even Herb, of course, says that. That should be a penalty. If, and on top of that, he wants to give an additional penalty for in a case like a Wes Sims stomping a Frank Mir, fine, you can assess it in a different one. The problem is the rules. The problem is not Herb Dean. And remember, he also does not have instant replay. Jeff, you're dead to me.
Look, an unintentional blow is like, let's say we're grappling on the ground and I'm trying to get a position, and in the midst of trying to get a better position on you, my knee ends up hitting you in the forehead and you just start, getting dizzy. I wasn't trying to do that. I wasn't trying to knee you. I was trying to maneuver behind and get your back. But inadvertently, I just kneed you in the forehead and you're out. Fight's over, unintentional blow. If there's a guy down there, he threw the blow. He threw the blow for the guy's head. How could you is there anything possibly more intentional than throwing a blow at a guy's head? Whether or not you see him, down, or whether you see him not down, he clearly threw the blow at the guy's head.
But did he know that Poirier was in an illegal position, essentially, that if he landed said blow, that it's considered, because a knee is legal in some cases, right?
There's no way he could have known. He had his ear to the back. According to Herb himself, because the fingers were touching was not enough. They have to be weight-bearing. They have to be holding you. How could he have possibly seen that? The problem is not the fighters. The problem, well, to an extent. The problem is not the referee, to an extent. The problem is the rules and the way in which we adjudicate this.
I saw a lot of people say, like, illegal is illegal, but it doesn't quite work that way. It's not illegal is illegal like in other sports.
Well,
as you said,
because the rules are not clear.
Exactly, because as you said, it's up to Herb Dean to determine, and I think MMA referees have the toughest job in sports as far as officials are concerned, because he has to now determine if the guy meant to throw the illegal knee. Now, if Eddie Alvarez would have headbutted Poirier on the ground, that's illegal no matter what. That's a DQ. You can't just willingly headbutt someone. But if Poirier's a little bit up, it's legal. Okay, and so he has to determine now, did the guy know?
If you knew, as a fighter, you knew, it doesn't matter if we think it was accidental or not. If you strike someone who is down with your knee, we're taking a point right away. By rule. We're not even going to give you a warning.
Like a face mask.
How much would that change fighting?
Sure.
It wouldn't eliminate it, of course, because face mask still exists, but it might put a big damper on it.
Sure, grabbing the fence.
Yep.
All these things. In MMA, it pays.
If they assessed an automatic penalty.
Sure, it always pays to cheat in MMA because they give out warnings like, candies on Halloween. It's a tough thing. I'm happy the UFC is going to run it back. It sounds like Poirier has a concussion, so that will be delayed. I think it's crazy, though, as Poirier has said, I believe on your show, the only reason he's appealing this is to get his win bonus. There was a time where if the UFC believed you deserved to win, they gave you your win bonus. They allocated that money to someone. Now, Eddie doesn't get win bonuses. Eddie gets a flat fee per his contract. Poirier doesn't have that luxury. You know, it's easy for me to say, you think he clearly won. UFC officials think he won. Lorenzo Fertitta is upset about it. You know, whatever power he has. Dana White wasn't happy with the call. Give the guy the win bonus. That's my, you know, like the money was going to go to someone, right?
I'm not even mad at UFC on this one. Honestly, we should just be real about this. We don't do this enough. I'm not saying that his managers are terrible people because this is a industry-wide practice. The pressure needs to be on MMA managers because whoever did it for Eddie did it right. These guys need to stop letting their fighters sign contracts where their purse gets split. The UFC held up their end of the bargain. The managers allowed them to sign a bad deal.
We talked about this recently with Anthony Johnson and things like that. Okay, one last thing before I let you guys go. Summer kickoff press conference that was, what, 6 days ago? I mean, it had its highs and lows.
It was the most Springer moment.
Okay, so please, I want to ask you, you're sitting there watching that. Are you embarrassed?
Yes.
Was this a black eye?
Yes.
Why?
You saw it. It was. Well, first of all, it was a black eye on different levels. One level that just all the nonsense that was going on. The second level, it was also just done poorly by all the fighters. Everybody wants to be Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
There is only one Conor McGregor, only one, and all these other ones who decide they want to be him, they just don't do it well. Even if they were, but on the second level, even if they were doing it well, it was still an embarrassment. One night later, we got to see Stipe Miocic, we got to see Frankie Edgar, we got to see Demian Maia, all win fights. The three complete gentlemen, soft-spoken gentlemen. They took it into the cage. They did their work there. It was like a contrast in, you know, MMA just devolving into Jerry Springer show or MMA, you know, putting their best foot forward.
Okay, like a dude dressed like Russell Westbrook got attacked by another dude with a mullet, and the guy who had the mullet was like, "Don't talk about my mama." This was truly an embarrassing moment. I mean, no doubt about it. I was like, what? I literally was watching this. I go, what have I done with my stupid, stupid life? Okay.
How was that bad? Was it one of the worst press conferences ever?
Yeah, yes and no. And like, you know, Valentina and Amanda, you know, my wife has broken English, but them talking trash in English, it just didn't work. But here's what I will say. It's also not true that nothing salvageable came out of it.
Right.
Some things did. The DC Jones stuff got me interested. I'll just be honest. It did. Like, that was tawdry as well. But
you like the cocaine talk, the prostitutes?
It's not about the sandblasting prostitute thing. It's just, to me,
I learned that term for the first time. I had no idea.
I still don't know what that means other than to rail them, I guess.
I don't.
But here's what I mean. What I mean to say is, this time around, it feels to me intensely personal in a way it never did before.
Yes.
You got a window to that, and I will say, even though the whole "don't talk about my mama" thing, I was like, oh my God, please take me now. Jesus, take the wheel. I will say that the African-American kid, there's just like Russell Westbrook, I'm blanking.
Kevin Lee.
Kevin Lee. God, what was I saying Kevin Hart for? I'm being racist over here. Kevin Lee doing that. I think it caught people's attention a little bit.
Oh, heck yeah.
If you go back and you look at the video views on people's channels, his is significantly higher. I had people saying they were kind of impressed by it. I will say, he seems to be a natural showman.
Yes.
We'll see what happens.
He's really coming out of his shell.
Kevin Hart would have been better, though.
Kevin Hart would have been better, yes.
SportsCenter had it. They put it on their Instagram, got over 1 million views. They were all very happy about it. And even the next day at the pay-per-view, I mean, they showed that whole incident. Like, you were kind of wondering, will the UFC... Now, if you're the Oklahoma Commission, do you do anything about this? Because they could technically do something about it.
Or Texas, too, could as well.
No, because the fight is happening in Oklahoma.
Oh, right.
They're applying for a license to fight in Oklahoma.
Right. Yes, I'm sorry.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Do you do anything about it? Or, you know, the UFC doesn't come to town all that often.
Beggars can't be choosers.
Exactly. It's like, all right, guys.
Yeah, we'll play ball.
You can't deny. I mean, they're going to promote this, right? This is going to be in the commercial. FS1's going to be all over this. Of
course.
This kind of was a home run, as maybe embarrassing as it might have been, right?
It's both. That's the problem with the fight game. It's like nihilistic, awful nonsense where guys do terribly embarrassing things. It just so happens to be perfectly valuable material to promote a fight.
If Dana White is standing there, do they act that way?
Well, I would have, if we were talking like a year or so
So
ago, I
today.
would have said no because he was kind of the
you think
call
Michael Kiss is
monitor.
getting
But
up
these
there?
days, with everybody kind of
Yeah.
crapping all over Dana White, the fighter, we talked about that earlier in the show. Maybe these guys don't care as much anymore, so maybe they would have still gone after each other. I don't know how much it would have gone. Look, they had security guys right
sitting
there.
there, yeah.
So I mean, it still might have happened.
I was waiting for someone's ex to get brought out of the back and be like,
Yeah.
I'm banging him now.
To me, the one time that I was like, was when Michael Johnson was talking about eating his feces whole. I didn't really,
John Anik.
feces in general.
Oh, I was waiting for John Anik to open an envelope. It's like, Kevin Lee, you are not the father. Yeah.
The whole thing was, I mean, look.
I do want to watch that fight now more.
Oh.
Which
Wait,
I hate,
hold on,
that's contradictory.
I hate myself for
Wait
saying
a
that.
second.
I know.
I mean,
That
still would-
completely.
This is a revelation.
Yes. What are you talking about? You said you were embarrassed.
I was. It was,
But you want to watch it, so it worked. By any means
I would have
necessary.
wanted to watch it already, but now I hate to say it, but it adds a level of something to it. I don't want to watch the lead up though. I don't want to see those
What do you
guys.
mean? The lead up is the reason why you want to watch it
Because
more.
I've seen enough of that. Get him in the cage, let him face off, let's go.
To be fair to Jeff, there is a little bit where you can go too much into circus territory.
Sure.
And this did it in its own right. They can't keep doing stuff like this.
Right.
But if it happens once in a while, the truth is it works, man.
And we think this is the McGregor effect. Guys are feeling like they
100%.
need to up their
totally.
game
100%.
in order to
That's
get
what
more
makes
money.
it embarrassing because nobody could do it like he can do
Yeah,
it.
and you can see how clumsy they are at it.
It needs to be
Except
organic.
for Kevin. Kevin was good.
Well, DC and Jones, I don't think are putting on an act.
No,
I
they-
think
they hate-
legit.
they hate each other.
I don't think either of them want it to spill into this territory. Like I don't think DC sat there thinking I'm going to talk about cocaine and prostitutes. I think there is such a disdain there for John Jones that it almost brings out the worst in him.
Yeah.
In a way.
And talking about the kids, this is not the
Yes.
end of it.
But he got a little bit more cheers than he.
Well, okay, it's a great point. In attendance, I heard it was DC. DC, I have never heard that, and I've been
Right.
to pretty much all of their press
That's
conferences
changing
at this
everything a
point.
little bit.
I think the big difference was he wasn't telling the crowd how to feel about John Jones. He was telling John Jones what he thought about him. Last year at that March press conference, he was telling the people, "Don't you guys see it? Don't you guys see it? He's a scumbag." I think now he's starting to just attack John, and people are like, "All right,
Got a
I
point.
kind of, Again, I'll say it. Carolina's my favorite part of the press conference because she has no idea what's going on. It just sits there with a little smirk like a choir.
She must be like, "These Americans
She's like,
are out
what
of
is
their
happening
mind."
here? And why does she have to sit next to the
Glad I didn't
biggest
learn English.
troublemaker every single time? We had like 10 more topics to get to, but
Yep.
unfortunately
Let's do it.
we have
We
to,
can stick around.
to say goodbye. It has
I got to
been
get
a-
uptown.
Yeah, this guy's got another job. Jeff and I just have to, I don't know, twiddle our thumbs.
Must
here.
be nice.
Yeah, but we are done. We appreciate you watching the show once again. Like I said, it's been a crazy time. The good news is, I do believe, unless other people don't want to show up, not Jeff, but
I'm showing up.
Luke and
I'll be
Chuck.
back. We have next week?
We've got a long stretch of
God,
shows
kill me.
coming up. So, stick around for that. But for now, we'll say goodbye. It's a relatively quiet weekend in the world of MMA. We didn't even get to Rory MacDonald's debut, which is happening. And the good news is we'll talk about Rory's debut, but we're actually going to tape delay those thoughts and save them for next week in honor of Rory's Bellator debut.
You can see how
airing
wrong we
via
were.
tape delay on Spike TV. What a shameful decision that is. But alas, we have said enough. Thank you so much for watching. For Luke, Jeff, I am Ariel. Again, appreciate your time. We'll see you next week.